Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Joining me in studio right now, State Representative Dustin Burrows. The House County Affairs Committee will be holding a hearing in Lubbock tomorrow at 10 a.m. And to preview that and tell folks really what they need to know and some of the discussion items, State Representative Dustin Burrows.
Chad, great. Thank you for having me on. This is a really important thing that we do from time to time, bringing committees out here to get kind of the perspective. Let me tell you why it's important. I mean, we're studying things like CPS and foster care and jail standards. And, one of the items that may be considered is, what is the education level that you need for a CPS worker? And let's say, some people come together and say, well, you need to have a doctorate degree, in order to be a CPS worker. Well, in Austin, Texas, everyone's got a doctorate degree, right? I mean, right. It might be easy to fill up. But, in Colorado City, you don't have that same pool. And it doesn't mean that some of the people with an associate's degree or some other, life experience may not be actually a better caseworker than someone with a doctorate degree. But so we need to have that perspective. And then on jail standards, I mean, one of the issues, we started looking at this after the death of Sandra Bland, is when do we need to send somebody to get evaluated? When do we need to take them to a psychiatrist? When do we need to put them in a hospital? Well, if you're in Houston, that may be a 5-minute drive, or you may have somebody in-house. Mm-hmm. But if, you're in Gale, that may be an hour drive, and that may take, a fourth of your entire police force to transport them to Big Spring for the entire day. And what can't you do? So this is an opportunity to get some feedback on some of the things that we're talking about and thinking about, and just to make sure that we're being considered. And Chairman Coleman does a good job of that during session, and he's doing a good job of that out of session.
Well, and this is going on tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., correct?
10 a.m. Yes, public is welcome. We have invited testimony, and then the public will have an opportunity to comment. So if anybody out there listening says, I've got something to say about this, or I want my voice to be heard, you can have it heard tomorrow. 10 a.m. Law School will be there most of the day on a variety of different topics.
Well, and CPS seems to be statewide one of the big issues of the day, correct?
Absolutely. A little bit of background. CPS, obviously, we deal with children who are taken out of homes, not because of the fault of the child, because, bad things have happened to the child. And most of those children are either put back into the care of their parents after some, steps are made, or they're put into the care of their relatives, or they're adopted out. But some of those children are not. And those children who are not often end up in group homes. In December of this last year, a federal judge from Corpus Christi came out and declared that those children, are not being treated in a constitutional way. It violates the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, because essentially we're making them worse, by going through this group home situation than when they went into it. So you have children who are being taken. They need some basic needs, and they need what all children need. They need, steady discipline. They need they need consistency. They don't need chaos. I mean, they've just been taken from the only home they've known, and so they need some calm and tranquility. And what the judge found, and they give 17 examples, one of which is from Lubbock, even in Levelland, of children who are put into, upwards of 11, 12 different schools in 11 years. They're transferred to 33 different places to live. That once they get into, they are abused by other children in the system who themselves had been abused, because abused children tend to abuse other children. And that's what the studies show, and that's what proves out, in these findings. And then because of, not having consistency in this abuse, the children act out. And they're dealt with by being put into hospitals and heavily medicated. And then the children often try to hurt themselves. There are stories in here of 5-year-olds who are talking about shooting themselves. There are stories of 10-year-olds walking into traffic because of what has happened to them. And you read these stories, and I won't go into the details, but they are awful things that happen to some of these children. And so then the children age out of the system at age 18. They don't have basic ability to function in society, Chad. They don't know how to cut food with a knife because of their suicidal tendencies. They've never seen a knife. They don't know how to drive a car if they were to have a job, because no one was there to teach them how to drive a car. They aren't able to fill out a job application. They've never been to a store to shop for food, so that's something new to them. No one's explained to them basic concepts of how do you live. They're not equipped to deal with this. And so we found in some of these situations they're taken in for 7, 8 years. They're subjected to 33 different places to live, 11 different hospitals, 7 different schools, and they come out without these basic life skills, and we turn them loose. And what have we done? And the federal judge says, look, they're worse off now than when they first came in, so something's wrong, and you guys need to take a look at how to fix that. And so we're in the information gathering stage and trying to figure out what do we need to do to fix it. I think everyone's in agreement. We need more CPS workers. We need less turnover. Those CPS caseworkers, can be the constant in some of these children's life to give them some of that stability, to take them out of some of that chaos, to help them transition through and get these life skills. And what do we need to do? Maybe I think it says most CPS workers, 26% of their time is spent with children. Most of the rest of it is filling out paperwork. Well, maybe we need to get rid of some of that paperwork so they can spend 50% of their time with children.
Visiting with State Representative Dustin Burrows. Can you hang around for another segment or two?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Great. When we come back, we'll talk more about this. Also, some other issues that the legislature may bring up in the future that kind of ties in with this as well. Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 790 KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in. Tomorrow, House County Affairs Committee holding a hearing in Lubbock. Everyone is invited. And this will be happening tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. It'll probably last all day long, but at 10 a.m. it'll be at the Texas Tech University Law School in the Hunt's classroom, or courtroom, over on the Texas Tech campus. Representative Dustin Burrows in studio with me. What else did you learn from this ruling that came out regarding CPS?
According to the judge, one of the things that she wants us to do with this special master is to start tracking child-on-child abuse, so that you know who the children who've been abused are, because studies show, and it's confirmed in this findings, that children who've been abused tend to become abusers. And so you know what type of care and attention they need to be, that you aren't putting children together that don't need to be together. And this is one of the things that needs a lot of improvement on.
And that's something that hasn't been tracked.
This is what she's saying in here. This is some of the questions we have for tomorrow is just what type of tracking is and is not done. What can we need to do to have, this understanding? Retaliation is another thing that she brings up. She says in some of these larger group homes, one of them she references has 430 some odd children, that they make a report of abuse and they get retaliated against. And so the people show up and the child all of a sudden is changing their story because the facility doesn't want to get in trouble. And so she says, you guys need to come up with a system. I agree. That, where the child can make reports and not have retaliation against them. I mean, there's just some really troubling things. And mind you, the children who get placed back with their families or in kinship care, or adopted out, they end up going on. And there's some good results that come out of CPS. And so I don't ever want to put, them in a bad light, because I think that sometimes, they're in the most difficult and impossible situations given what the child has been through before they come in the care. Mm-hmm. But we're talking about a small subset that come out worse than when they went in. And you got to ask the question, what are we doing? If that's the case, and there's a small defined, quantity of children that go into this and come out worse without skills to cope with life, something needs to change, and that's part of what we're going to be talking about.
Does this tie in with any way, and I don't know if y'all will be talking about it tomorrow, but there was a report from the Austin American-Statesman, I believe it was yesterday, about the foster care system, and you keep hearing stories about the foster care system in Texas and about how it's in, I believe one article put it in crisis mode.
So, yeah, and yes, there's all sorts of different things. If I could say, overnight, one of the big things that we could do to change this and have better outcomes, we need more foster parents. We just do. We need more good families that are going to take these children in either on a temporary basis or a more permanent basis to give them that steady discipline, that support they need to take them out of that chaos they just came through. And that's where you're going to see the results. And it's not easy at first. You read the stories of where the children came from. Often the parents are on drugs and they themselves were abusers, and they just need to settle back into some normalcy. And for a certain segment, less than half, they're never going to get it because of where they are. There's nobody to deliver that. And so, yes, we need more foster families.
Tomorrow during the hearing, you're going to be hearing from a lot of elected officials as well, correct?
Absolutely. Sheriff Rowe is going to be there. Others from around the region. We're talking about jail standards, cybersecurity, and a host of topics in what we at the state level who look at county government, County Affairs Committee, can do to help better support them.
What about cybersecurity will y'all be taking a look at?
So one of the things I have a question for, and we have a pretty good panel, distinguished panel that's going to come testify, what are the threats? I mean, I think to figure out what do we need to do, who is interested in getting our information? You hear stories of hackers that have stolen personal information, I think a year ago from the federal government, where they got all the fingerprints from everybody who did a background check. I want to know who got those and what do they want to do with it. Mm-hmm. You have this thing called ransomware that's out there, where you have, overseas Russian mafia and Eastern groups that want to hack in and basically, block out your access to any of your files. And we need to come up with a policy as a state about what are we going to do with it? Are we going to negotiate with, hostage takers, essentially, or are we going to basically invest in someone who can undo, their encryption? And, I represent 7 counties. I mean, Borden County is one of my counties. It has 635 residents. I mean, to basically say, Borden, you need to figure out how to deal with, ransomware, that's an impossible task. And so at some level, what do we need to do at the state level to help provide resources and access, if they get their system locked down?
Well, and it has been a problem even out here where some businesses have been targeted here in Lubbock. There have been stories about businesses who were targeted, and luckily they didn't click on that link in the email that had their computer taken over, but it's been happening.
Well, here's a question. I saw a story from a year ago where the cartels, hacked into a UAV of the military to basically reroute it so they could better have, access. So they better have their people go through different lines. And so when you have, sophisticated billion-dollar drug cartels out there that are hacking into UAVs, what are we up against? And so part of what we're doing is we're just asking the questions tomorrow from the sheriff and other people who are in charge of IT. What are our threats? What do we need to do to make sure that, our counties and smaller counties in particular can, meet those so that our personal information isn't compromised?
Visiting with State Representative Dustin Burrows. We'll have one more segment. When we come back, we'll take a little bit of a preview of what the next legislative session may hold when we come back here on the Chad Hasty Show. Chad Hasty Show, Representative Dustin Burrows in studio with me this morning, just talking about tomorrow's hearing that'll be here in Lubbock. Starts at 10 a.m. over at the Texas Tech Law School. And members of the public, of course, you have the speakers who are already lined up who will be testifying, but you will also take comments from the public as well.
Absolutely, and I invite everybody listening to come to watch it if you feel that there's something that we could benefit from knowing, because we obviously know we don't know everything, or you just want to weigh in on something you have heard today or you hear tomorrow. Please come. There'll be sign-up sheets, and we are taking public testimony, and that's the purpose. These committees don't often come to Lubbock, but when they do, this is a great chance for the community to get involved and bring up issues. And even if they're a little off topic, we're still going to listen to you. And
if somebody isn't able to make it at 10 a.m., if they show up at noon, they get off early, maybe from work, or they want to, come spend in a half hour or 45 minutes, they can do that, right?
Absolutely. So we start at 10 o'clock. Typically, sometimes we try to get done in 4 hours. Chairman Coleman's not leaving until Saturday. So he's going to stay here as long as we have testimony to take. And we've got a pretty full boat, so we may still be, going later in the day.
Okay. All right. And we are looking ahead as well to the legislative session. It seems like it's far away, but you are working and getting ready for it. What do you think will be some of the top issues for you, maybe, and also just for the ledge overall?
Now, look, it's going to be a tighter budget. We had estimated oil and gas prices to be at $65 a barrel, oil prices. It's not. So we're going to have to stretch the dollar a little bit. I think that there's, some things where we have to fund needs, not wants, and better do that. There's going to be a effort, and I agree with this, to take another look at school finance reform. We had a bill last session that people put on hold because of the pending lawsuit. That's now come out. We know what the Supreme Court has done or decided not to do. And so I think there's going to be opportunity to have a broad conversation about that and some legislation that will be filed. I think there's going to be some talk about LGBTQ rights. The president has put that front and center. Then healthcare costs. I mean, this is something that, Chad, I think every time I've been on this show or any place I go, it's one of those issues that I think is probably one of the most important issues, and it's not talked about enough. I mean, the cost of health insurance is unaffordable. I mean, most people that I represent cannot afford health insurance, because it is just out of reach, and that reflects what the cost of health care is. Texas needs to be the example as a big state on what markets can do to drive down costs. And I've got some bills I'm passionate about, I'm going to be writing about, and I'm going to be filing to try to let markets work because I believe in markets. And if we don't do that as a country, I mean, there's going to be such an outcry from people that can't afford health insurance that there will be a move to basically socialize or have single-payer system. I do not want that. I think that's a bad idea. I think that's not who we are as a country to have government rationing health care, but that's where we're headed.
Well, and I think that's how it was set up. With the Unaffordable Health Care Act, I think that, the administration all along, this has been the end game. Drive up the cost, where people just beg for single payer.
Yeah, well, we saw 2 of the 3 carriers decide they're going to leave the Texas market for individual plans last week, and then the one that stays wants to have a price increase of their plans by 50, 60%. I mean, it's set up to fail, but are we just going to sit by as a state and let that happen? I say no. I think we can actually do a lot on letting markets work to drive down costs. The first part is transparency, have prices posted online. The second part is getting consumers engaged to negotiate prices. There's incentives out there, not penalties. I think incentivizing people is a lot better than penalizing people, to get people to want to actually buy, in bargain for better health care. And I will be taking, the lead on at least the conversation about doing something about that. And I think Texas needs to take the lead because the rest of the country is failing.
State Representative Dustin Burrows, as always, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate having me on.
Look forward to having you on a lot more as we get closer to the legislative session as well.